Hey everyone, and welcome back to Salesforce Mojo. Today we're going to be talking about branding your Experience Cloud storefront. Over the last couple of episodes, we've kind of been talking about different areas that you can configure and customize inside of Experience Cloud, and we're going to continue doing that. But today, we want to talk a little bit about the mechanisms to make it look more like the brand you're trying to set up here. So with that, give us a like, put any comments in if you like the content, and let's dig right in. Before we dive into Experience Builder, let's quickly go over kind of the top level what we're planning on doing today. Inside of Experience Builder, there's a couple different places that we can customize. There's kind of this concept of a top level theming and branding capability in Experience Cloud, so we're going to spend some time on that. We're going to spend a little bit of time going into kind of page level configurations, which also includes some of the component level configurations that we can do. And then we'll go a little bit into maybe some customization capabilities, and also a little bit about best practices on where we really should focus our time and energy. So with that, let's dive into Experience Builder. Once we're in Experience Builder, we're going to come to our home page, which is where we always land, and you'll see that we have our nice unbranded storefront here. So first thing you got to do is you got to know that you always start with kind of the theme level or branding level configuration. That's kind of the default states, and then components can override those capabilities as you go from component to component. So the first area you want to do is you want to come over here to the left-hand side and go to theme. And once we're in theme, there's a couple different things that you can actually customize. You can see colors here, you can see images, fonts, and theme settings. So let's start with colors. Once we're in colors, we can see that there are three sections of the colors. There's a general, which applies, like I mentioned, across all the different pages. And then there's the navigation, which is specifically for the navigation menu. And then there is the login page. And one of the nice things about Experience Builder is that as we make changes here, everything's going to change with us. So if we change the action color, which is the color that is primarily going to be used for your kind of main color for your brand, if we were to change that to red, for instance, you can see that the colors up here in the navigation start to change red. And if we have any action places down below, like this, well, looks like we don't have anything down below, but you get the idea that it will start to change as you make changes here. So we are trying to brand this as the Tiny Home Storefront. So we're going to be changing this to the green color we've chosen out. Now, one of the nice little tricks with this is that you can see that it's RGB, and you have to kind of either know the code here or also be able to kind of move things around, which is not very precise if you ask me. But it has a handy kind of little hex code conversion built in. So if I were to come in here and put in 2A8F56, it'll automatically convert that to RBG for me. So that's typically how I do it, because when we work with design agencies or our designers, they usually work in hex code. So that's a nice little good to know. So that's going to change it to our green. That is the Tiny Home green. And then the second thing we're going to want to do is move the link color to kind of the same thing. In our case, we're going to have kind of the colors be the same to start with, and then we might end up changing this as we go down the road here. So let's go in to here. Let's see. And we'll put 2A8F56 again, and that will change it to our green. I could also come in here, copy and paste it over, but you get the idea. So that will allow us to kind of have the hover. And so if we come over here and click preview, we can kind of see, how does that actually work, and is it going to work for what we're trying to accomplish, and how does that work across the loader screen right here, and then the links across the different experiences, and then also all the buttons right here too. So I think that so far that looks pretty good. We're going to jump back over to home, and the next area that we're going to customize in this theme section is our image. Okay, so this is one area where there's a little bit of differences on when this was set up versus some of the newer technology with Experience Cloud. So right now, images for the logo can only be pulled from kind of the general asset library inside of Salesforce and not Salesforce CMS. So if you're clicking into this and you're hoping that you can pull in one of your Salesforce CMS images, it's not going to work just like that. If you were to create a custom navigation, you could definitely utilize that. But if you have logos over in the CMS section, you will have to replicate them over here, which is pretty easy because if you click upload, it's going to ask you to either select from the asset library I just mentioned, or it'll ask you to upload from your computer. So I'll go ahead and click this, and then I already have this selected, so I'm just going to drop this over and click open. And this will automatically load this into the instance for me and put that as the logo. Okay, so once that's uploaded, then I will close this, and we can now see that we have a logo on the top left corner, which is pretty nice. One of the things that I will mention about the logo as you're kind of theming your overall brand is you don't have a ton of control about how it actually works up in this navigation here. You have a little bit of control, but you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're careful with what image you select and how that actually lays up with the content around it, making sure that it's long enough and that in the image it's either left or center depending on what you want there, and that it doesn't kind of stretch out based on everything over here. So again, not a whole lot of control, a little bit of control, but that's about it. The next thing I'll do is I'll go into login pages. And so if I go over into login page right now, we can see that the default background is this kind of connected network image thing here. And it also has kind of a default logo that's selected right here, which we can override in another place in the back end. And then it has our action color down here below. You may not want this background image here, which is totally fine. You can come in here and you can clear this, which will clear that out on this page. And you can kind of have a white background. You might have to do some overriding on the colors here to make that work. Or you can upload your own image and really make that look personalized there. Because this will be the first page that a person sees, you definitely want to make sure you get that right. We're going to come back to the login page another time, but let's actually go back over here to fonts for a second. So out of the box, you get a couple different fonts here. You have all of these kind of standard fonts that are web safe that you can upload. You can use your own custom font capability as well. This is kind of a hit or miss depending on how accessible your font is and is it web safe and making sure that it has all the different capabilities. But as long as it's a pretty well known one, you definitely can do some uploading of custom fonts here, which is pretty nice. All right, so let's go back over to our home page. Now that we're back at our home page, we can go through a little bit more about the components, right? So we've done overall branding here, and just actually one more thing on this. If we come over here to our theme again, and we do this drop down called Manage Branding Sets, we can see that we just inadvertently created our own branding set as we've been going through this community. But you definitely can create new sets here, and you can definitely do a little bit of audience selection with those branding sets. So there's a little more capability there that we won't dive into, but I definitely want to make sure you know about them. So once we've had our general branding set, now the question is, how do I refine this? Because not every component we want to use this green, and not every text we want to use the black. So how do we really customize this to our brand more? That's really when it comes down to the component level. So we've done the top level. Now if we dive into our header here, we can see that we're in our storefront header or store header. And inside of each one of these components, there's going to be kind of this branding capability. A lot of times it really comes down to just colors, background colors, text colors. So you can see, for example, in the store header, we have a middle background color. So let's come into the bottom border here and let's change this to red and turn up the visibility here. And then if we jump out of the component real quick just to get it set, okay, and we go to preview, we can see that now there's a red border at the bottom here. So you can kind of see that the component overrides give us the ability to make some changes, which is good. And then each one of these components has a little bit about layout too. So talking about overall branding, maybe we don't want the max width to be 1170, I should say. Maybe we want it to be bigger, and so we can increase the width of that, and you can see that the overall width of the navigation increased. So that capability kind of comes at a component level. We're going to tick this back down just a little bit here. So as you go through, this is kind of the refining you're going to want to do. So each one of these components is going to have its own branding capabilities. You can see that the account section up there has the ability to have hover text and background colors and border radiuses. So each one of these is going to be important. I'm going to call out a couple of key ones here because there are limitations to these that you may need to override. So for instance, this cart button right here, let's drag this over here. This cart capability, you can see, really has no control. It has the ability to do, total items or total products in cart, but it has no branding capability. So it's completely derived from the action color that we changed earlier. And you might not want that to be your action color. You might want to keep it black, or you might want to change it to another hue, or whatever it may be. That type of configuration comes with the CSS overrides. Now I'll put a cautionary tale in here for a second. The CSS overrides should be used sparingly as much as possible. The CSS overrides are global. They are for everything across the site. And if you're not really careful with how you target the area you're trying to override, that it can cause some downstream effects that you may not catch before you go to production. So I'll put that cautionary tale out there. One other thing I'll mention is that if you're creating your own components and you're dropping them into the storefront, you can definitely do your own CSS on top of it, and you can definitely have those overridden from what's default in here, which is the best way to do it if you do have custom components. But in cases like this where I really don't want that to be green, that we really have no other choice but to do this CSS override. So we'll do that now. We'll go over to theme. You'll go to this drop down right here and you'll click edit CSS. And you'll see that it kind of says basically what I said, be careful with this. And once you click use overrides, it's going to give you a blank space to essentially drop in whatever CSS code you want to target whatever you want on any of the pages. So before we do anything there, I will show you how I do this. So what I typically do is I will go to preview. I will kind of right click on here, click inspect, and it will pull up the Google Chrome targeting capability. And then basically your job is you're trying to figure out which class or ID or type are you targeting to really change colors or anything else about the CSS behavior. So in this case, I basically want to change this CSV, which is specifically the B2B buyer cart badge to a different color. Let's say that I want it to be blue or white or whatever it may be. So that's basically what I'm trying to override. And you can see that right now it's using this variable, which is the variable or the action color that we set up earlier. So what a really easy way to do that is to try to find where that variable is being put in. And you basically want to use the same targeting that you can see here from what they're doing already. And you basically want to override that. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to go back to, close out of this for a second, go back to Builder. I'll go over to Theme, go back to Edit CSS, and then I'll use this to override the functionality. And we want to fill this with, let's say we want to fill this with white. And one key important thing here is that if you just leave it without this important exclamation point, it's not going to do anything because the default state will always override what you put in here. So you always need to put this exclamation point important at the very end, otherwise it won't work properly. All right, so then we have that. Let's save it. All right, so that did work for us, but hey, that doesn't look very good. So maybe we come back over here, and this is kind of where the back and forth of making these edits is pretty easy. So now we can have it black here. But let's say that we kind of like the green, but only on hover. So this is where you get a little more advanced in your CSS, and you can say, okay, well, I want this for the default state, but maybe I want for hover state, I want it to be the hex code that we put into our configuration. And we'll click save here and preview. And now we can see that, oh yeah, that's looking a little bit better. And this is just an example to show you the capabilities. You may not actually want something like this in real life, but we'll use it for our example here. Okay, so I think we've spent enough time here on the main page. Actually, I think I'll do one more thing. We're going to spend a little bit of time with the navigation because we typically see this as one area that people definitely want to update. Sometimes they want to update how a person interacts with the hover state here. Sometimes it's a drop down. Before we go into that, let's actually go back to our storefront configuration, and we're going to go into categories, and we're going to make one subcategory. Just so that we have that actually showing up in the navigation. So we're going to go in here and click categories, and we're going to do lumber as a category, and click save. And actually we want to have this be the parent, products be the parent here, because that will give us the drop down capability. And then let's go ahead and assign a product here. And let's go ahead and, well, the window doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, does it? Let's see if we have a lumber in here. All right, we're just going to do door for now because I don't think we have an actual lumber. So we'll click next and click save. And then let's go over and just refresh the index real quick. And I'll be right back whenever this is done. All right, we have that done now. It took about 10 minutes, but if we go back over into our experience builder, we should be able to refresh and see that our products have a drop down now. All right, so if we go to preview, we do see that we now have all products and lumber, which gives us the ability to kind of go into subcategories if we need to. In some cases, we've seen that customers want to be able to highlight this with different colors, brand colors, based on their brand set. So that's one area that I thought would be useful to show. Same kind of thing as the last time, is you want to come in here and you really want to find the right class or type to be able to target to. So I believe in this case we used, if we go back up to the top here, let's come back down to the subcategory. Yep, there's a class in here called drop down list item. I'm having a hard time finding it right now, but that's the class that we actually can use to override. So why don't we do that real quick? We'll go over back into theme and edit CSS, and we'll do one more, which is drop down list item hover, and we'll do the background color of, let's just do yellow, just so we can see it. Okay. And we'll click save, and let's see if that works for us. Oh, we must have mistyped something, so let's go back over into our edit CSS, and we have drop down. Okay, so that took me a second to figure out what was going on there, but a quick synopsis here for us is that based on the different type of navigation you have and what version of the instance you have, the actual classes may be different because some of them are running on old versions of navigation, some of them are running on new versions of navigation. So you can see this is the multi-level menu navigation here. In some of the older versions, it's a little bit different, single menu navigation and so on. But we've got to figure it out. So we can see if we go down the drop down, we can see that's hovering with the yellow now. So let's just go back up to the theme, and you'll see that it's a little more complicated than this version. But we basically have to use kind of the class and then type selectors here, and then hover state on top of it, and then we do the yellow that we wanted to have in our drop down here. And I found that by coming over here to preview, going to where we wanted to go, clicking inspect, and then in the Google version of this at least, you can go to hover and then select the hover state. And what that will do for you is, so this is the one I actually applied here, but you can see that it's selecting, or it's highlighting the one that is going to be most applicable to you. So if you just copy this, this is exactly the same selector that I'm using to get the yellow to show up there. So a little more complicated in this version, but accomplishes the same thing here. As you can see that in almost any area of this, you can really just override the coloring as you need to. But again, you want to be careful because as I shown here, it is different from different versions and timestamps. So you'll just want to make sure that it's the right thing for you. Okay, so last couple of things we're gonna go here before we finish up is let's go to product detail page. Product and detail and list are some of the areas that you'll probably want to customize the most outside of the home and navigation. It's going to be the area that your customers are going to be spending the most time on. And you can see that it by default takes the colors from the theme, but this one does have quite a bit of capability to override. So you can see that we have the ability to change kind of the base product content up here at the top. But then each one of the sections that it uses, you can override. So the add a list button has its own overrides right here. The add to cart button, if we wanted to change the shade of this, let's say the background color, instead of being the theme color, we wanted to use a custom color. You can come in here and you can say, oh, well, I actually want this to be maybe a little bit darker so that it sticks out versus the add to list, which I think looks pretty nice. And then if your whole entire brand requires, border radiuses, you can definitely come in here and change the border radius from 0 to 5 or whatever it may be to make sure that it looks like your brand actually does. So really any of the commerce ones that are put in here, the components that is, they do have a fair amount of customability, even down to a lot of the labels. So if we didn't want this to say quantity shorthanded, we want to say quantity, full written out, or some other type of like unit of measure you could put in here as well. So those are kind of the capabilities here. This component kind of has the same thing, text colors here, with the ability to add fields. So not a whole lot of crazy things when it comes to branding on the product detail page, besides the the colors and the arrangement. That's the other thing you kind of have control here is what you actually pull in and how you use it. We're going to go over to product list, which is a little bit confusing to get to the first time you do it. It's actually not the product list, which would make a lot of sense because product list page is kind of how the industry refers to it. But in here, it's actually the category detail. And this category detail is basically all the categories and the details about them, which is why they call it category detail. But from an industry perspective, people call this product list page because it's the list of all the products. So the first thing you need to decide when you come to this page from a branding perspective is, what do I want my layout to be? So you really have two options. You have grid or list, and it really comes down to what type of information you want to show, what type of experience you want. We find that a lot of people like to use the list over the grid. The list actually provides, I think, a good representation of all the information, and it gives you more space to really put everything in. So this is what the list would look like, and then if we switch this to the grid, this is what the grid looks like. So they kind of have the plus and minuses here, but I'll show everything based off of the list since that's my favorite. So really this capability, kind of same as product detail. You have a lot of different sections in here, and each section has its own color capability and text size capability. And then each section has kind of the fields you want to show here. So right now it's showing the product name, but if I wanted to bring in product description, I could drop that in, and I haven't put any descriptions in my product, so they're not showing up, but those would show up automatically. And then all the other sections kind of have the same capability and flexibility here. Right now in this version of the B2B commerce template, this is the the original LWC version or the Aura version. It doesn't have a whole lot of componentization on these type of pages right here. It's really just one monolithic component that you can customize. But in the new LWR version of the B2B commerce that's coming in the next couple of months, these are going to be more broken out and more customizable. So I'll definitely post a video on that when we get to that point. Okay, so last two things I wanted to mention. One is the next page that you probably going to want to spend some time on is the cart page. We're not going to spend too much time on that today because it's just like all these other pages. You basically can have override capabilities and that's it. I did want to spend a moment to go over into checkout here, because checkout is unique. Checkout is, at least in this version where it's flow-based and not the single page checkout, the checkout can kind of look a little bit weird if you're not used to kind of how this information is being pulled in. So you can see that we have a checkout header here, and we have a checkout flow. And this flow is using a screen flow to basically show all the information. So when you're going through checkout, it kind of looks a little bit disjointed here because we have this giant header right here, and then we have our checkout flow down below, and this header has a different size of logo and size of a shopping cart, and so it just kind of looks a little funky. So in the past, we've done a couple of different things. You can either leave it as it is right now, and it's fine, or you can come into your page structure, and actually I think it's under, let's see, theme, and then configure, and then yeah, here we go. There's a theme layout for checkout, and you can come in here and edit the properties. And in the edit properties here, you can change the width of the page. So maybe you want the overall width to be smaller or larger. So maybe we want to bring this down a bit. And once that updates, you can see that the overall is a little bit smaller in the center here. So you definitely still have those capabilities. Let me see if I can get this back to close to where it was at before. You definitely have a little bit of those customizations here, but what we found the most effective, and really comes down to what you prefer, but what we found the most effective here is bringing in the checkout header. Once the page loads, checkout header into the content header section, and then removing this one. And you actually got to do that by going into this section and checking that box right there. And that will show just the component we dragged in. And now you can kind of see that it's in line, at least, with the screen flow. So it all kind of looks the same. And then what you do from here is you can really do a lot of overrides to make this look a little bit better. So I'm just going to drop in this code here to the CSS override. And it's not super complicated, but you can see that there are 4 sections here, basically overriding the height of the logo, or overriding the height of the checkout item and the color and all that fun stuff. So if I click save here, you can see that in this instance, it's showing kind of a black and white version of this, but that doesn't really work too well with our brand in this case. So we're going to come back into edit, and we're going to change this to, I believe it is this one right here, and change this to white. And now we're going to have to change the kind of color back for the cart here. And so maybe we just comment this one out in this case. So actually it doesn't, I forgot, it doesn't let you comment out in this case. So you can potentially remove this. And now we're just overriding the size of it. But again, now it's back to the green that we had talked before. So we might want to override it back to black with kind of the hover. I won't do that in this case, but at least in this case, now your header and your cart kind of fit the same size as, if we go back over here into home, it fits the same size as the ones that are on your other navigation and kind of in the same frame. So it won't feel so disjointed with your experience. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of perspective of how to make some customizations to the homepage, which is going to be really important, the navigation, really important, product list, product detail, and the checkout. Throughout the rest of the course, you might dig a little bit further into how to customize some of our custom components we'll end up working through and really refining it. But now that we've done this, the next area that we'll spend a little bit of time on, either in a following episode or kind of in between, is branding kind of, this hero image, for instance, and some of the content down below, so it actually looks like a tiny home storefront. And with that, we're going to close up. If you guys have any questions from the session, feel free to post them in the comments. Again, give us a like if you like the content, and we'll see you next week.